Well, the naked truth and fact is, we're all strapped to pay our taxes, and that is why the banksters keep us down.
Catch the Free American weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Learn in public school, and did our fathers all for history, all fighting back for liberty, so we could play the tyrant fool.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Indentured servitude, slave, overburdened and bewildered, feudal.
All right. Welcome back to the Free American Order second half here. And I'm going to continue something. Now, I've told you about the control of the media. I've got Alex Jones admitting that he's Jewish up on my Facebook site. And a little before that, we mentioned the Ebola here. Let's see if we've got that available. About
to get our guns. We do have our intelligence insider to directly speak to you, and you guys can talk amongst yourselves, if you will, about this very issue. W is our intelligence insider.
Ebola takes out its victims very quickly. So if somebody has Ebola, within literally just a matter of days at the most, they show the signs of the infection, and they don't get a chance to infect lots and lots of people before they show that they're infected, and it's a little bit easier to quarantine. But there's other types of disease where the incubation period is longer. And as the incubation period gets longer, the ability for them to spread disease widely before it's suddenly detected, and then you can't also corral it easily. That's a real threat. Well, if we look at these weapons, if we look at these gang members like a disease, when they come in but we don't see their actions immediately, then we don't corral them, stop that movement quickly, and it continues to spread and spread and spread. And then by the time that the first action by them is seen, it's already too late because they're so far and wide spread out. And their interconnectivity, command and control, they've got a chance to get themselves in place. And so that we haven't seen some horrible event happen quite yet isn't that it's a good thing. In some ways it's a bad thing, because it means that the infection is continuing to spread and continuing to get a root. And when it finally does begin to show itself, we're far more vulnerable. And this is so invasive what's happening to us. It's such a tremendous threat. So it's important, and like you were mentioning with the sheriffs and other people, the society operates on a very thin thread of civility. And as soon as you have just a handful of people taken out, others can't go do their job, and suddenly everything we know about our type of society collapses very quickly. It does go into some kind of martial law type situation, and our ability to get back to some kind of normative state is going to take a very long time. So those are real threats.
Yeah, I mentioned something about the Ebola incubation period. I had on my show Dr. Jane Orient, who's one of our top physicians here in Arizona where I reside, and she informed me that the incubation period for Ebola can be up to 3 weeks. Now, she said it doesn't always take 3 weeks, but it can be up to. Now, one of the things about pandemics that I've learned in my research, and Dr. Orient confirmed this, a lot of them, and you're kind of alluding to this, will burn themselves out. If you get to a quarantine the people who are exposed early, then you can really kind of limit and you'll burn the virus out. The problem is there's multitudes of viruses coming in, and some of them are going to be carried by mosquitoes. In fact, Barb Peterson, who did some research on horizontal transfer of diseases through mosquitoes, this has now been engineered to make it possible. And in addition, you have air travel, and they're taking these illegal aliens and they're transporting them all over the country, either by bus or by plane. So you don't have to wait like in the old movie Outbreak, where it starts on the East Coast and works its way west. It's going to be everywhere all at once. And
well, and that's also presuming, Dave, that it is a natural outbreak as opposed to an engineered outbreak.
Yeah, I alluded to that with Doug and Joe in the first hour when I talked about my former FEMA contact, personal friend who went into hiding, saying we've got stuff out there that could be released, that will spread like wildfire, and the world doesn't know we have it.
Well, and the other thing, just as a very rapid aside, we know that we had the persons on MH17 that were going down to the AIDS conference, and one of the subjects that was going to be voted on and discussed was whether or not they were going to sign a document together stating that the AIDS virus was a genetically engineered, genetically targeted disease developed in South Africa, and say that it was man-made, and I suppose we'll never know the true facts on that at this point. With all those people out, that just isn't going to come out. But certainly other things that are out there could be of a similar nature, similar threat. At the very least, this population coming in provides great cover if that was going to be done or happen out in the future. But I was looking at the gang members as being really almost like a virus, just as a correlation, where they get in here and get a root and get their systems in place before the actual coordinated action begins. And I think it's similar to Ebola. I mean, it's going to rip the guts out of the country.
Well, one of the things that I looked at, and I used to teach military history a long, long time ago, is that the normal rule of thumb, it takes one soldier per 50 citizens to garrison a country, all things being equal. And I don't think the UN is going to be able to generate enough manpower early on to completely control the country. This is why I think you have to introduce pandemics and weaken a significant number of the country and reduce those numbers. But I think this is why groups like MS-13 are here. You'll have your blue helmeted troops by day, and you'll have your terrorists by night going out and making political hits designed to preserve what's coming in. And in New York, they ran an ad about 3 weeks ago for basically gun confiscation experts. And it's right out of their UN New York office. And before they do that, I said they have to have a false flag. And I've been racking my brain thinking about, okay, what could this false flag possibly be? And then I hearkened back to a map that I've been in possession of. In fact, I'm in possession of the entire set of documents. I have a set of documents that was given to me by a retired member of the Department of Agriculture. And she came into possession of it because she was concerned that the massive war games that the U.S. Navy and Air Force are planning off every one of our coastline, including most of our territories, would be detrimental to crop yield. And so she tried to draw attention unsuccessfully. And to the best of my knowledge right now, guys, I'm the only one in the country that has the map, and it's on the article right at the top, that shows this massive war game. Now, that map comes from an organization called AFAST, which is the sonar aspect of the Navy. And what they're doing, all those rectangles on the map, and if people want to look at it, they go to commonsenseshow.com and look right on there, and you'll see the map pull right up. You'll see oblong rectangles and squares and stuff, and it basically incorporates almost every aspect of the coastline of the three United coastlines, except for the Gulf. There's some areas in there in the Gulf that are barren, and I think largely because those areas are destroyed from the Gulf oil explosion, or they could be being left purposely open. So this, in 2009, the Navy announced their intention to do a 5-year war game. No one does a 5-year war game. No one. No one usually does a 30-day war game. And this is a 5-year war game. And I have letters, and one of them is published in the article down in the bottom in the area I titled Appendix, that's written by some of the congressional members of California, Oregon, and Washington. And in fact, later, this was joined onto by Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer and Henry Waxman. They added their names on at a later time. They wrote to the Undersecretary of the National Oceanographic Administration and asked him to stop the Navy from doing these war games because of all the mammals they would destroy with the sonar and the missiles and the drills and all this stuff. And NOAA turned them down. So they took their plea directly to the Secretary of the Navy, B.J. Penn, and this is back in, I think, April of '09, and Penn just dismissed them, said, you're not going to tell us how to conduct our business, and told them to go away. Now, you would think that if the congressional delegations of Oregon, California, and Washington would come out and say, you can't do these war games because they're going to destroy our coastline, they're going to destroy millions of mammal life, and this sonar is unwarranted, it's going to harm everything in the area, you got to stop. You think this would make major media. You think this would be all over Fox. It would, but no. I mainstreamed, researched this. It's not there, but I have all the documents. And people can satisfy themselves that I put some of those documents in this article this morning. Here's what it means, Doug, and this is where I think we can cut right to the chase here. The question I asked sarcastically and rhetorically in my article, are the ships facing the coastline or are they facing out? Because yesterday I put the map in my article and I asked people, tell me what this war games are doing here for 5 years. And most people wrote in and says they're going to try to keep us from escaping when martial law comes. That was the most consistent guess. And I think that's logical looking at the map, but it's not right. They're using sonar. What do you look for when you use sonar? You look for submarines.
Big fish.
Big fish. Big fish that fire big fish.
That's right.
And if you want to take down the grid, and I don't think the entire grid's coming down. That's another aspect I'm actually writing about in tomorrow's article. The Chinese have weapons, EMP weapons, that they can take out localities. They can take out a section, a region, a state, or 3-state area, but they don't want to take over a nation that's entire grid system is down permanently. And we're talking, if you took a grid down in the most common way that people think of it, you're going to see a situation where you're not going to have much to inherit. 90% fatalities, according to the Naval War College, after 2 years. My Congressman Trent Franks, has been beating this bandwagon to harden our power supplies and our power grid, against an EMP attack, and no one's listening to him. I think he's being very responsible. I'm not a big fan of his, but in this area, he's right. But these ships are out there looking for an EMP attacker.
All right. I'm going to stop that because I want to kind of finish up with a story I started with Michael Tsarion about alien visitation, because I think all of this goes back a lot further than 1913. Let's listen to Michael here. This is a continuation of the show that I put up yesterday. I guess that was yesterday.
On the genetic level, or they may have just done it by conditioning over time to get that out. And some of us are like that. Some people in the world, the Mozarts, Beethovens, Salvador Dali's, whatever, they have that more humanistic side. They're so connected to the universal matrix, so tuned in. And then you get the other side, which is, it's the whole Star Trek.
Yeah, that is kind of where I'm at, folks. I have been fed information 45 years ago, sitting in, meditating in a jail cell down in Texas, put there because I promoted and smoked marijuana. Today we've got, you can smoke marijuana in 20 states if you bribe a doctor. So the medical industry that's responsible for more deaths than you can shake a stick at, including the abortions, I've been trying to give you the right information. I've been trying to tell you what's really happening. And even before I had research, although Tsarion talks about Velosky, I read Velosky, Worlds in Collision. I read that 45 years ago. So I knew what had happened, and I knew in the past, and I wrote books about it. Hopefully those will be released. If I can get the support of you people out there, you Americans, you so-called Christians that haven't been deluded and brainwashed, we got a chance here. And again, let me do this.
What if that establishment doesn't want and doesn't have the consent of the governed? What if the two-party system was actually a mechanism used to limit so-called public opinion? What if there were more than two sides to every issue, but the two parties wanted to box you into a corner, one of their corners?
What if I told you all along, two wings of the same bird, bro? This is Judge Napolitano, and he's trying to tell you what's going on, just like I've been trying to tell you. He's got a nice suit, and he's getting paid to get me on, you know, some of these networks. I'm not getting paid by anybody. That's why I asked you for donations.
What if there's no such thing as public opinion? Because every thinking person has opinions that are uniquely his own. What if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, then there's something wrong with that, or there's something wrong with them?
Games. Let them have their bumper stickers and their straw hats. Let them go to the conventions and let them fight with each other out there, candidate against candidate. But we own them all, so what difference does it make?
What difference at this point does it make? What difference at this point does it make? What difference at this point does it make?
The difference is the American people are being conned. The free American and veterans today are the only source of media out there that's giving you the truth. I don't sell advertising. Why? Because I won't be controlled. Oh, that's why the Genesis, that's why Republic networks won't have me on, because their advertisers threaten them if they have Clay Douglas on.
Moving statement into the U.S. congressional record.
There is no government of the people in Washington, D.C., folks. And I've been there. I've been involved in a presidential candidacy, traveled from coast to coast with a presidential candidate. First one to sign up for the elections in the Republican Party in 1996. Charles Collins is now dead. I remember what he had to say. I remember what he wanted to do, because I wrote his speeches.
Statement reveals why J.P. Morgan interests hired 12 high-ranking news managers.
They are all criminals, folks. They are not the lawful representatives of the people. I'm talking about your bought and paid for congressmen and senators.
The 12 were asked to determine the most influential newspapers in...
There is one party controlled by the Council on Foreign Relations.
America. They were to figure out how many news organizations it would take to control generally the policy of the daily press of the United States. The 12 found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought, and an editor was placed at each paper to ensure that all published information was in keeping with the new policy.
And that's why Alex Jones talks about Nazis. He don't talk about Zionists. He don't talk about Jews, because he is Jewish. He is one of them. And you can go to Free American 69 and hear him tell you that. Michael Tsarion, come on back.
You know, double-sided guy, right? You know, we are these schizoid beings, and because we're schizoid beings, we create a schizogenic society. And we're all laboring under this problem right now, and many people have questioned, you know, what we can really do about it. But there's a historical component to this as well, and that is that we have our history being artificially moved forward. Now, we have a very interesting book called the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, which is another one of the ancient scripts that was, I think, translated by the Medicis. Could be wrong there, but certainly it came into the West by way of the Romans. And one of the captions in that book says that, "Speak I of the ancient Atlantis, speak of the days of the kingdom of shadows, speak of the coming of the children of shadows. Out of the great deep they were called by the wisdom of the earth man. In the form of man they moved amongst us, but only to fight were they as men. Serpent-headed, when the glamour was lifted, crept they into councils, taking form that were like unto men, slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdoms, taking their form and ruling over man, to destroy man and rule in his place." So the ancient books are talking about deep magic, they're talking about weaponry, they're talking about psychic control, they're talking about mind control, they're talking about evil archies behind government.
So, if they had the technology back then, if they had all these abilities back then, they may have lost, you know, certain elements in their cache. But why take however many thousands of years to get us to the point where we are today?
Because it's a slow process. Some of these works talk about that's not a pleasant thing for them. However, some of the works, William Bramley, in his book Gods of Eden, and there are several other ancient books like the Annals of the Four Masters, which is an old, again, one of these old volumes from Ireland, and a few other books like that, actually refer to the fact that during the Renaissance period they'd already built back their spacecrafts. As weird as this sounds, so when we look at those Leonardo da Vinci drawings of, you know, the old helicopters and submersibles, that's not just him doodling thinking, oh, tomorrow we'll have all of this. This is him recording what they once had, because he was initiated into these secret societies. He was very much a member of some of these brotherhoods, and he was one of the people that is an official figure. He's one of the people that's above, you know, radar level, where we know him as a historical figure, but there are many who were put in charge of this building of this technology. So they were not just doodling and prophesizing to the future. They were people, agents of these secret societies, working on this particular paradigm, as the people behind MIT today and some of these other characters behind some of the scientific institutions are.
Wait a minute.
They're also involved in this.
That sounds so, and obviously this entire show sounds so fringe, because, and maybe it's alternative, if you could use that word, nature, but how, this is where I kind of get lost. I can follow the idea of technology and the concept of, you know, as in the cradle of civilization. Suddenly you have a social structure and money, and, you know, the concept of you know, a patriarchal society. It had to have come from somewhere. That's the logic side speaking.
Right.
But when you start diving into and start talking about secret societies, you know, whether they're called what's a common term, like Freemasons or
Illuminati, or whatever you want to call them,
that's where I'm not quite making that connection, because it just seems to me that and maybe I subscribe to the thought on, well, if it happened or if it's happening, wouldn't we know about it?
Well, we do know about it. See, the thing is, we do know about it, but that when you study secret societies, it's a very separate, in a way, it's a separate type of research that very few people can make the connection. What you're talking about is a very difficult thing to do, is to try and, first of all, work out what is the alternative history of the world, and then find out how these secret societies operate. Now, I'm trying to find this particular... here it is. In the Book of Enoch, this will help lead into what we're talking about. The artificial movement forward, you have to have custodians for that, and it has to be financed. And also, you have to have a pyramidical hierarchical structure when you're orchestrating all of this. One, because that works very well, and two, you have enemies out there. The Atlanteans have their rivals, so they want to conceal as they're moving this down. They're not just doing it in the open. You have to conceal from your slaves your agenda. So this is where the idea started to happen, where you create cellular, hierarchical, self-enclosed structures, which is basically what the secret society, you know, system is. It's a system of decompartmentalization. So and the pyramid is the perfect symbol of that, like a hologram or a fractal. Each person working in their cell, just like the CIA operate, just like the triads operate, all of these criminal organizations work on this, the gangs of you in New York work on a cellular structure, right? Well, anyway, In the book of Enoch it says, and Azazel, this is one of the dark angels, Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working with them. And they were led astray, and men became corrupt in all their ways. The Welsh talk about it. The Smithsonian also has understood, the Smithsonian Institute and the Bureau of Standards there in Washington have brought to light various objects that prove that 7,000 years ago people were producing steel in furnaces at a temperature of 9,000 degrees centigrade. That's almost like the heat of the sun. It's just recently been proven. Dr. R.V. Dolphin, after studying the Libyan desert glass, he found that, beautifully ornate glass and beads and necklaces. But Dolphin suggested that for the ancient Phoenicians to have worked with temperatures equivalent to 6,000 degrees Celsius, nothing else could make these particular vessels, that they must have known the secret of atomic power. This is one of the top experts in that field. And 6,000 degrees is only 2,000 degrees short of the temperature of the sun. So again, official think tanks, organizations, bastions are discovering this. The word Europe, where do we even get that word? Europe, in Greek mythology, came from the goddess Europa, who was the daughter of the phoenix, which rose from what? The flames of destruction. The very name Europe was given because it's a miracle, right? Just like Ireland was called the Blessed Isles, the Fortunate Isles. Europe is the one who survived the flames, the cataclysm. Now, the people, the secret society thing ties in because these individuals created these orders in order to be fraternal in nature, to have degree ceremonies, so that only initiated people would know what is the top. What is the top? Pick up any Masonic book and look at the 33rd degree, the 32nd, 33rd degree. I go into all of this in the second half of the Atlantis book. It says Prince of the Royal Secret, the Keepers of the Royal Secret, the Prince of the Brazen Serpent. These are the high degrees of Freemasonry. What secret? The secret of genetics, perhaps? Is that the royal secret? Well, the symbolism in Freemasonry shows you exactly that. And in the DVD I have coming out that's a companion of the book, I go into that very deeply. The whole occult history of America is detailed with meticulous detail in that DVD. It's 15 hours long, like we were talking earlier. It's a multi-DVD set. And it goes into the whole concept of the secret societies, and I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But one thing before I want to leave the old Celtic stuff, I think this is something monumental of importance. We must understand also that there wasn't just this vast technological expertise, there was also this sort of clairvoyant ability.
Uh-oh, what did I do here? I did something here, and my apologies here. Let me try to get us back here with Michael Tsarion very quickly here. My apologies here. Am I still on? I got Truth Radio. I've got that on. All right. We're okay there. Now let me see if I can get back to Michael Tsarion. Don't know why that cut off. But strange things always happen on this show here. Almost there. Almost there. Where did we go? All right.
That he's also a published author.
Has been found out to mean cut off or divided. The word Atlantis literally means from Atlan, which means the broken pillar, the one whose foundations were shattered. You know, so the etymology is very, very key in looking at this. Now, the rise of the secret societies, specifically, one event we can talk about, because again, to track in 11,000 years every single machination of these forces is some task. But something very specific happened in England in the 15th century that I think would answer your point that you made about one of the connections to the secret societies. And this is really going to test people's credulity, or whatever you want to call it.
As if anything to this point
has not.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're thinking, why not just have the whole pie now, right? Well, what had happened was that, remember I was saying that the pursuers originally of the Nephilim, who come from wherever, they had made ready to leave quickly. Before they left, they really, even though they didn't have time to scan the planet, they thought that there may be a chance that on...
Hello, this is 361. You're calling in live to the Free American Hour. What can I do for you?
Is this Clayton Douglas?
Yes, sir, it is.
Hey, Clayton, this is Jeremy Fox with the Texas Veterans Commission. I'm returning your phone call.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is being recorded because I am doing a live radio show. But I called you because back in 1964, I volunteered for the U.S. Army, and I believe they tried to kill me. I almost died, and when I lived, I was told that I would be sent to Fort Hood for a medical discharge, and I would receive a pension. I never went to Fort Hood because they gave me a discharge before probably, I think it was 10 days before all of my benefits kicked in.
Okay.
I was on bivouac when it happened, when I caught spinal meningitis. I woke up the next morning, I couldn't blouse my boots, I couldn't tie my shoes, I was being paralyzed, and I had a sergeant that tried to march me around, tried to make me do push-ups in front of the whole squad, marched me around showing me all the latrines I was going to dig when I got back off a sick call. I was the last one on the bus. I was the last one into the doctor's office, and I sat down. Doctor said, "What seems to be the problem, son?" And I said, "I'm sick," and I passed out. I woke up in a bed of ice. And they told me that my mother had been notified and she was on her way. They sent her a telegram telling her I wasn't going to make it. And so I came back down that little tunnel from the light, and every time I heard footsteps outside, because I wanted to see my mother one more time. She made it there. They told me they were going to send me to Fort Hood, and I would get a pension. And the sergeant was busted down to a mess hall sergeant. I got to see him every morning when I went into the mess hall. More potatoes, Sarge. More potatoes here. Now you think I was sick, you son of a bitch? And so they got me out a little quickly. I had told a chaplain that came in to see me, you know, I won't follow the orders of imbeciles and idiots again. You know, if I could get out of this wheelchair and walk, I'd walk out the gate. So they gave me a discharge before my veterans benefits came due, and and my mother tried to do something about it. They told her my records were destroyed in a fire. I don't believe that, and I'd like to know if there's something I can do.
Okay. Have you ever filed a claim with the VA before, since you left the service?
I tried one time when I was in Florida. I've traveled all over the country, and I had a request number 15768039801, but I think that was just for my records. I think I just requested the records. I did see somebody in the Veterans Administration in Florida, but nothing ever came of that.
Okay.
And you know, my government's tried to kill me a couple of other times, but this is more recent and has nothing to do with the VA. Other than the fact that I realized there was no expiration date on that oath that I took. And so I've been pretty active. I do a radio show, doing one right now.
Okay, well, what I would recommend to you, do you know where our office is located?
All I need is an address, sir.
Okay, it's the VA Outpatient Clinic, and it's 5283 Old Brownsville Road, Corpus Christi, Texas.
Okay, I know where that is.
Okay. And we're the Texas Veterans Commission, so you would just, you know, our office is located in the back of the clinic. So you would just come to our lobby, sign in on the sign-in sheet, and we have 3 counselors in this office, and the next available counselor would come out and advise you on, you know, what you can do as far as filing the claim with the VA. If you filed one before, we may need you to sign a power of attorney with us so we can have access to your VA files, so we can kind of get a history of what's going on with your claims and advise you on how to move forward.
Can you check on that? So happens that I still remember my RA number. Do you need that?
Actually, to look you up in the VA system, I would need your full Social Security number.
All right, sir. It's I will give you that. I prefer not to do that on the air here, so I would...
Yeah, I kind of figured that. You may just want to come into the office and talk to me or one of the other counselors one-on-one so we can help you out.
What is your name, sir?
My name is Jeremy Fox.
All right, sir. Jeremy, I will try to get in there as soon as possible.
All right, Clayton, we look forward to seeing you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. And by the way, if you want to know a little bit more about me, you can go to freeamerican.com. And that's where I publish my magazines. That's where I do my radio shows. And you can even buy a book with my life story on it. It's called Mystery Babylon.
All right.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, you have a good day.
You too, sir. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah, might as well try to see what I can get from the government here. And Michael Tsarion is my pseudo guest today, talking about ancient history. Go ahead, Michael.
Not here, the Nephilim were still alive and hiding out. So they erected around the earth a sheath, what might be described as a sort of an etheric membrane. And this energy field of etheric energy, it's technology. It's a high form of technology, but it has probably some other magical etheric qualities to it, is still there. And it acts like a semi-permeable membrane. And what it does is it places the earth in quarantine. This is exactly how the ancient texts are talking about it. They refer to it as a bottomless pit. And the Native American Indians talk about it as great web in the sky. The Bible refers to it as the sea of glass. I like to refer to it as the Stargate. It's literally a gate, and the moon is its active component. It's like the lodestone around this thing. What it means is that anyone with an alien DNA cannot leave this planet, even if the technology was to be rebuilt. I think that the Nephilim discovered this, or the descendants of the Nephilim discovered this around the 15th century when they had spacecrafts enough to fly out into our solar system. These were, by the way, observed, and that's why they wrote it down. That's how I know that they had spacecrafts then, because it was recorded by people on Earth. Even in London, they say the king saw it. So these spacecrafts went up there and realized they couldn't get through. When they realized this, and that their own people from their own planet had done this, and that they didn't have the key to get out, they were in a real predicament now, because they just spent about 11,000 years trying to build back their technology. They knew, hey, we're making great progress here. But what does this mean? Even if we build all of this technology back, we're chained to the pit, we can't get out. All the books, including the most ancient ones, talk about this incarceration, quarantine effect. There's so many books that ancient chronicles go into this, but it means that beings could probably still come into our solar system, but it's not possible for those with the alien DNA to leave. And I refer to this gate as the Stargate. And in one of the Gnostic Gospels called the Pistis Sophia, which is a very interesting book to read. Again, it was something that should have been included in the Bible, but was not. They refer to this as a great dragon whose tail is in its mouth. They say in the outer darkness there is a huge dragon whose tail is in its mouth. And it also talks about it in Revelation 8, where they refer to the bottomless pit, and they say the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven onto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And then in the epistle of Peter, another biblical work, it says, God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto the judgment. So this Stargate is also known in astrology. Those who study astrology, especially Chinese astrology, know that the Chinese refer to this as the head and tail of the dragon. They call it the dragon's nodes in astrology. And the whole idea in mythology of the dragon encircling something precious. You'll even see jewelry, an artwork of a dragon encircling a globe or a pearl or something of great price. Well, this comes from the idea of an encircling dragon energy encircling the earth itself. You'll see that motif a lot in artwork all over the world. In fact, the symbol of the dragon eating its own tail, which is known as the Ouroboros, is found throughout the planet, throughout all Mexico, Egypt, India. The Celtic tradition has the encircling dragon. And of course, when we hear about the great hero, where does this whole idea come from, where the hero has to go out and kill the dragon or slay the dragon? Has anybody ever even bothered to ask what on earth that motif would mean, or where it originally came from, and what it's meant to signify? No, we don't. We just accept these things and don't really ask a lot of questions about it. But the fact is, again, that these are cryptic mythological motifs about the breaking through the Stargate and the slaying of the dragon, or the mastery of the dragon.
So they've got to be mad. They can't get out.
That's right. Now, what happened in the 15th century was that after they discovered this, the Tudor dynasty, now the word Tudor comes from tutor. It really meant the teacher dynasty. These were the direct descendants of the bloodline of the Atlanteans, okay? So there's been many, the Habsburgs, the Merovingians, if anybody who knows that name, the Merovingian dynasties, who were the royal families of France. And then we have the Tudor dynasty of England, or direct bloodline descendants from the Atlanteans of old. They were put in charge of this problem. And the man that they chose to put onto the problem to be the sort of the champion of this discovery of how to break the Stargate problem was known as Sir John Dee. Now, people in the magical tradition who studied the history of magic and the history of astrology will know that name. John Dee was one of the most powerful black magicians in the world, and he worked with an Irish clairvoyant called Edward Kelly. The Queen of England used to get in their boat real late at night and float down the River Thames to John Dee's home, which is called Mortlake. And he had the greatest collection of books, thousands of times more than was in any of the libraries for hundreds of years. He was a very famous man, and one of his jobs, his daytime job, if you want to call it, was he was the ambassador to the court of King James or the court of the Queen. And when he would go and visit foreign dignitaries or be as an ambassador, he'd always write back in the old left-hand writing and the cryptic writing bit, to his queen. But at the bottom of all the documents that John Dee would send back, he would write his code word 007. Okay?
So like a James Bond.
James Bond is actually the MI5, MI6 comes from a specific time and event. The Spencer family, which Lady Diana Spencer's forefathers, right? Edmund Spencer, John Dee, who was the original 007. John Dee formed what we know as British intelligence. The first secret society of the world that was a British intelligence was formed by John Dee. He was the leader of it. So when Ian Fleming, who was initiated into all of this, decides to do something in his retirement, what does he do? Well, he sits down and writes about his own order, his own group, puts it as, again in front of us as fiction, and a myth is born. But very few people know. And you can go, you can actually see these works. I've got the pictures that show you in the DVD I'm producing on this. There's the 007. And if you look at the old MI5 logo, it's exactly the same logo as you have on your American dollar bill, of the Illuminati pyramid with the eye at the top. And the crown of the Queen, she who must be obeyed, the Virgin Queen, Queen Elizabeth I. Now, so there's a lot. I have a whole chapter on John Dee in the book and his associates throughout the world. And John Dee discovered that, look, really, if there was meant to be a technological way of breaking through the Stargate, it probably wouldn't happen. He, being a powerful black magician and an occultist, decided on something different. He opened up what is called a portal, a pan-dimensional portal. I know this sounds far-fetched, but this is, you know, I'm not making this up. I'm just a scholar reading this information and piecing it together purely objectively. There are magical principles. He used a system of magic known as Enochian magic, which involves, you know, as you see all those quaint images of the magician standing in his circle and all of that. Again, that's put before us as this quaint, laughable thing, you know, in the encyclopedias of the world, and movies are made. As a matter of fact, why, have we never questioned why the symbols in magic are planetary symbols? See,
He was the wizard of 1,000 kings, and I chanced to meet him one night wandering. He told me tales, and he drank my wine. Me and my magic man kind of feeling fine. The
again, you know, there's so many things put in front of us. The symbols of the planets, the symbol of the angels are often planetary symbols. In John Dee's system of magic, he was able to open portals, literally, to other dimensions, to what we would call oversouls, that the magicians or the occultists of the world call the angeli, motivori, the Crates. These are oversouls. They don't live on this dimension. Their intelligence for the other dimensions. That doesn't mean they're good. They're of a different dimension. He contacted these individuals, or these beings, let's say, these fourth dimensional entities, to see if they would have an answer to their earthly problem, and he was told that they did. There was solutions to this. They could open the gate in time. And again, this is another one. We've covered lots of events, but I've always tried to point out the one or two most important events, like, you know, the first thing that affected Earth history was this genetic hybridization. The next one down the line, I would say, would definitely be the pole shift and the loss of the technology. Right? This has been major U-turns in our Earth history. And this one, in the 15th century, needs to go up as one of those all-important, what you might call junctions for Earth history. Dee was told that there were, I mean, he was given volumes of information. They even say that his consciousness was almost like, you know, frazzled, completely wiped out, insane, psychotic, because of the stuff that was coming down. And he had to, you know, he had other, you know, people all over the planet, famous magicians in Europe, all working on deciphering this information that came down. But it all centered around two basic premises. One was that these beings that I call the macrobes, I'll explain why in a minute. The macrobes told John Dee that they had to learn how to release energy. They had to learn how to create matter from energy. Right? That was the first premise they were told. The first key to the Stargate concerned creating matter from energy. But that they were so dumb, they were told, that we'd have to show you that in 2 stages. So even, you know, point 1 has 2 stages to it. We'll have to show you how to first release energy from matter. Okay? The second key involved the properties of a certain element. And that element was silicon, is what they were told. Now, a lot of this made sense to them because, of course, remember, they were themselves from other planets and had, at one point, great sophisticated computer technology. But they were being re-told this again.
The Chris Perillo Show is brought to you by Microsoft Windows Media. Download Windows Media Player 10 at Microsoft.com/Windows Media.
Now, in 1945, at Trinity, which is I've always thought is an interesting name for it, at the 33rd meridian of the Earth, which is a famous Masonic number, Phase 1, or let's say Phase A of Phase 1, happened. On July 16, 1945, when the atomic bomb was dropped, that was them patting themselves on the back going, well, I think we got Phase 1 halfway completed. We know now how to release from the atom energy. From that date, in 1945, from the 1940s and 50s, they've been moving on the second half of that, of how to create from energy matter. We would call it the nanotechnology stuff that's coming in now, right? We see this plotted through, and the symbolism of these companies tell you exactly what they're doing. So, and the other one was silicon, which is another word for what? You say silicon, you obviously mean computers. So the computer revolution, the computer age, and the symbolism. I have another DVD coming on the symbolism of the world.
Are you recording Jordan Maxwell?
Yeah, very much. A lot of my stuff is actually even dedicated to Jordan Maxwell because of this. But certainly the occult agenda of the symbolism used, like the Pentium, and, you know, there's a whole, people who get the DVD will see this more than we can go into now.
The Pentium.
The term, the name, the symbolism. You know, the Intel uses the serpent symbol if you look at it very closely, and it's a whole other study in itself about the gateway and why certain terms are used and why the 5-pointed star is used and what computers are basically. Yes, they make our life easier and so on, but they were not created for us. They were created by the Pentagon. The Pentagon itself is controlled by the Tudor dynasty of England. The Tudor dynasty hasn't gone anywhere. They just changed their names a little bit. But this force that was behind John Dee are funding the U.S. Pentagon. In fact, the U.S. Pentagon, that shape was designed by occultists. John Whiteside Parsons, who was a member of a secret society called the OTO, helped in the formation of it. The ceremony of commemoration, the ceremony of opening of the Pentagon was on September 11th. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of, and the layout of Washington, D.C. is an entire study in itself. I got a whole chapter in the book on that. But the layout of Washington, D.C. and many other cities of the world based on sacred geometry. Because the pact, why I call them macrobes, these fourth dimensional oversouls that John Dee connected to. The word microbe is important because it explains this. If we were told, before the advent of the microscope, that there was all sorts of microscopic life forms, you know, on the head of this pin, on my hand, you know, all around us, we've been taken down to the local street and burned. When the microscope came along, everyone could see, my God, there's an entire ecostructure, you know, whole forms of life, a biosphere that we couldn't see with a physical eye. Well, above the level of the human is the macrobes. These are entities, beings that overlook us. They exist just in the same way as the microbes do, above our level of continuum. The instrument, there is no instrument physically for understanding that they're there, but except the human intuition.
And folks, that I have seen these beings. They have walked beside me. I've always felt that I was sent here
Discover what's really going on in the news.
The atomic attack.
Media
God bless you all. Thank you. Make a donation.
Get the news behind the news at truthradio.com. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs on demand. Listen when you want to. truthradio.com. The truth is out there. All you have to do is open your mind and listen.
And I've been broadcasting on Truth Radio for 20 years. Make a donation, folks. freeamerican.com. Hear these videos and see these videos up on Facebook, Free American 69. God bless you, and thanks in advance for your support.